I think it's super important for each of us to recognize that our voice matters. That is our power. And when we use that power, that is how change happens in the world. Historically has always been that way. And you are phenomenal communicators. That's why you're here. So you have tremendous power to drive change.
You guys are going to save lives. You already do save lives. The marketing industry has the best platform and megaphone and experience. And how do we get people excited about, postpartum depression and saving moms' lives? And how do we get people excited about breast arterial calcification on their mammogram so that they don't die of a heart attack and heart disease?
Hello and welcome to the MM+M podcast. I'm executive editor Jack O'Brien. You are in for a special bonus episode of the podcast. It's going to be the Women of Distinction keynote address from Jessica Federer, who is a women's health investor and formerly was the chief digital officer at Bayer, along with Liz Powell, who is the founder of Women's Health Advocates. Lesha Bushak, our pharma editor, was the moderator on this keynote address. And I really think it's something that if you weren't in the room for it this year, you're definitely going to want to be at Women of Distinction next year. This keynote featured two powerful voices in the women's health space who highlighted the glaring disparities that still remain, but also gave our audience of medical marketers a toolkit on how to change them. We hope you enjoy this conversation. You're going to learn all about how you can make a tangible difference in women's health. Please enjoy.
Thank you so much for joining. I'm very excited to have both of you be a part of our keynote session this year. We're doing things a little bit differently. We have two keynote speakers, and it turns out that you actually know each other, and your work has interlapped in women's health. Liz on the policy side and Jessica on the investment and funding side, and we're going to get into that. So to start out, I'd love for both of you to just briefly talk a little bit about some of your background in women's health and the work that you do, and sort of also how you know each other.
Absolutely. All right. So what year were women allowed in clinical trials in America? Oh, that was really close. That was excellent. All right. She said 1994. It's 1993. We're going to give it to her, the lady in pink. Well done. So until 1993, women were not allowed in clinical trials. In 1993, we passed a law that required minorities and women to be included in federally funded research. So it took a long time to catch up. So this is why women have twice the rate of side effects from all drugs. Did you all know that? Women have up to twice the rate of side effects from all medicines. So women's health is a really new field. So coming out of Bayer as the chief digital officer of Bayer, the first woman chief digital officer of a big pharma company, I might add. I know. It's great being among all these incredible women here. Keep breaking through those glass ceilings and the concrete ceilings as well. Coming out of Bayer, I was just shocked to find out that the largest women's health fund, VC fund, was smaller than my events budget. And for marketing leaders here, you understand how small that can be. So it was like the largest fund was around $40 million, which is terrible for women's health, half the planet. So I started bringing investors together, and in 4 short years, we've 6x'd the amount of funding. So the largest fund in women's health is now 6 times what it was 4 years ago. Still not good enough, but we're getting better. And so the momentum around women's health investing has really been growing. And I met this brilliant woman because she is probably the loudest voice on the Hill that knows every senator and congressperson and advocates for women's health, which is what we need to change the environment.
Too kind. So thank you all. I'm so honored to be here. So I am a lobbyist, and I used to work on Capitol Hill as a legislative staffer, and one of my bosses was co-chair of the Women's Caucus, so we did a lot of women's issues broadly. I've always had a strong interest in health policy, and I started my own lobbying firm called G2G Consulting, and was going about my business. We had a lot of focus on life science innovation, healthcare, high-tech innovation, and I might have a women's health client here or there, like a maternal health product or some policy gap here or there. Well, what I started to realize about 10 years ago is that there were not one-offs. These were actual systemic problems across the board. And so during COVID, we started to launch some different coalitions. The first was Women's Health Innovation Coalition. We then did breast cancer. We did digital health. So we kept doing different aspects. And I finally realized we need all of women's health, right? Head to toe over the lifespan. So Women's Health Advocates, I launched in February last year. And that is what we cover, all of women's health, connecting all those dots. And then we have different committees that if you just want to focus on breast cancer, love the ad, by the way, love that ad. You can focus on that. Or if you want to focus on reimbursement parity is a huge problem. On average, it's 30% lower if it's a female patient. Did you know that? Essentially the same surgery performed on a man and a woman, 30% lower reimbursement if it's a female patient. There's many other things. But anyway, so that is how I got involved in women's health advocacy. And of course, got to know Jessica because she is such a leader and a pioneer in driving more investment in women's health.
And, I'm sure everyone here, obviously we have a lot of discussions around health disparities. Anyone who's in the healthcare space is aware of them. And as someone who's been covering the healthcare industry as a reporter for 10 years, I thought I knew a lot about women's health disparities, but it turns out there's so much we don't know at all because the science is so new. So I know you've already mentioned a couple of statistics, but are there anything that you think would surprise this audience about women's health?
Oh, yeah. How much time do you have? Yes. All right. So we were all taught growing up that women's second X chromosome is inactive, right? Men have an XY on the 23rd chromosome. Women have an XX, but that second X, it's silent. It's inactive. Well, it turns out in recent years, scientists have discovered that it escapes inactivity. That's important because we thought it was silent and now we're realizing, okay, it's not. Now, what could that mean? Well, if you look at autoimmune disease is 80% women, 80. Now, guess where your immune genes might be? You think it's on the X or the Y? It's on the X chromosome. So, because women are 80% of autoimmune disease, we're really starting to discover now that the Y chromosome has hundreds of genes for immune response. The X has thousands, and women have double of that. So we're starting to really now dig into the science. So the science is brand new. To give you a couple other examples, what do you all think? Here's another pop quiz. I bet the lady in pink knows the answer again. What do you think the first year is that we saw what pregnancy does to a woman's brain? Okay, here, 82. 95, 2000. All right, I'll save you guys the trouble. It is 2024. And it gets worse. The researcher had to herself, before getting pregnant, she went and got an MRI and PET scan. She did the test on herself every week during her pregnancy to do the publication. And that was the first time we saw how the woman's brain changes shape and actually contracts and expands during pregnancy and shifts around. So we had no idea how pregnancy impacted your brain. I had the honor of being on the board of Sage Therapeutics, a company out of Boston that launched the first postpartum depression drug. When you are pregnant, the hormone levels in your brain go to 100 times, literally 100 times or more what they usually are. And then you give birth and they drop. And so bringing out a new medicine that recognizes the physiological foundation of a disease like postpartum depression has been life-changing because you never knew how many women had it until you introduced a treatment. The prevalence numbers were ridiculous because women wouldn't admit to having postpartum depression if there wasn't a treatment. Now they can take a pill once a day at night for 2 weeks with some kind of fat, and they feel better within a day or two. It's really amazing how we're starting to study the science of women and what that is unlocking. Now, one last one. What do you think the year is that we first saw how embryos implant in the uterus? Kind of basic. We all wouldn't be here if that didn't work, right? The first time we saw how that happens? 2001, 2004, it was last year, 2025. So to give you a sense of why women's health is so exciting for investors, the science is new. And when the science is this new, there's great opportunity for innovation and development for diagnostics, treatments, and cures. If you look at the most profitable category of the most profitable industry of the world, which is what? GLP-1s. Most profitable category of the most profitable industry in the world. GLP-1s, it's driven by women. which is why Eli Lilly has now launched a new accelerator just to invest in women's health companies because they see where the market is going. So those are some things that people may not know. Liz, what else did I miss?
Oh, that's so great. Just to add to that, so let's go back to reimbursement. So
back to the money.
Yeah, let's go back to the money. So if we have to get a biopsy done on a male part versus a female part, you know exactly what parts I'm talking about. It is 141% higher reimbursement rate if it's yeah. So it's really egregious. Some of these are like huge differences. And why do I keep talking about that? Well, for many reasons, because if you're an investor, you're thinking, well, is this really worth it? Is there going to be an ROI on this? If you're an innovator, you're thinking it's too challenging. It's never going to get reimbursed right. If you're a doctor and you're scheduling OR time, the facilities don't make enough money off your surgeries, so they have to space out your surgeries. And then over time, maybe they even shut down that completely because they make more money off other surgeries. So there's a real impact on our health and our ecosystem from that reimbursement rate. But some other ones I could share. What percentage of the NIH budget do you think goes towards women's health research?
Wait, does any still go?
That's what I was going to ask.
A little bit. 30%. It's around 8 to 10%. It's in there. So it's very, very low. What else could I share? There's so many gaps. Okay. We talked about since 1993 that women and people of color must be included in NIH-funded research. Very, very important. In 2016, they also required sex as a biological variable to be considered in all research. So to this day, only 61% of NIH-funded studies are doing sex as a biological variable, meaning just considering how sex might impact the research. Of those, only 44% are actually doing the sex aggregation that we would need. And Jessica so eloquently talked about the sex differences go down to the cellular level. So we still have quite a few gaps.
And to add one more, just to follow on that same train, it's great that the NIH is requiring differences by sex, but they're not yet requiring, the FDA is not yet requiring studies to be powered to show differences by sex. That guidance from the FDA, I'm just going to straight out tell you because you're never going to guess. The FDA put out that guidance in December of how to power studies to see differences by sex. And this is really important, is that if you've ever taken Ambien, you know, when Ambien came out, the dose that was right for men was not the right dose for women. Women do not respond the same way to drugs. And on a cellular level, every single cell has a sex. We talked about the XX and XY. For a long time, we just tried so hard to treat men and women equal. And we finally get close to that and like, that was a wrong goal. We do not, in life science research and clinical drug discovery and development, treating men and women as equal is a huge disservice to women and also to men. It's not good science. It's half science, and we can do better than that.
You've both identified some of the major gaps. But you've both done also amazing work on the ground, mobilizing both on the policy side in DC and also in the investment and funding side. So how have you gone about mobilizing action on the ground to start moving the needle to close these gaps, you know, both on the funding side and on the policy side?
Together with each and every one of you. I mean, this is how change happens, is these relationships in rooms with particularly leaders in marketing and advertising, because you know how to share and communicate the message that we in drug discovery and development or in VC are not very good at. So these individual connections and raising awareness and education, you know, to use an example that gets everybody like really frustrated, I posted a video on Instagram yesterday. You can check it out, JJ Feds on Instagram. This video, I just got really annoyed by the maternal mortality rate in America. So I thought, let me take the maternal mortality rate numbers and put it next to the 10 most hazardous, deadly jobs in America. You can guess where I'm going with this. It wasn't good. If you take the 10 most deadly jobs in America, loggers, roofers, you know, these are really dangerous professions where men know they are going, mostly men, they know that there is a high risk of dying. And you put the maternal mortality rate over that top 10 most deadly jobs. All maternal mortality rates for all moms would be the number 11 most dangerous job in America. If you're looking at moms over 40, that would be the number 3 most deadly job in America. And if you're looking at black moms over 40, Well, far and away, that takes the cake. That is way more dangerous than the number one most fatal job in America. So we are really failing our mothers in the United States because that maternal mortality rate has doubled in the last 40 years. So you're giving birth today, you have a doubled risk than your mother had or your grandmother had, depending on the generation. And a lot of it has to do with, going far back, medical malpractice insurance rates for delivering babies got too high. So family practitioners, rural hospitals, they just said, we can't afford the medical malpractice insurance. We're going to stop delivering babies. So now in the United States, 100 counties have zero maternity care, none. 2/3 of counties in America are maternal care deserts. So that has a huge impact on why moms can't get prenatal or postnatal care and why we're really failing our moms. Becoming a mom in America should not be one of the deadliest professions in our nation. That's outrageous.
So I'm going to go to a positive place.
Please.
Let's go to a
Bring us
positive place
back up.
from that very important information. So I have to tell you, this past year, we were able to grow Women's Health Advocates members across the country to about 5,000 in 1 year. We're in all 50 states, 27 countries, and people are coming out of the woodwork, whether they've had a horrible gaslighting experience as a patient, they lost a loved one, they're a clinician, they're a researcher, an innovator, an investor. Literally everyone in this ecosystem is coming out to say enough is enough. And I think people are asking questions, they're advocating, they're getting emboldened, whether they are advocating in the doctor's office or in the public sphere, at the State House, the U.S. Capitol, what have you. And so I'm actually very, very hopeful right now. I've never seen such a movement take over the country, and we're all feeling it, right? I mean, it's elevated in social media, in so many places, and we are all playing a role in that, especially you, this audience. You are the ones that know how to communicate most effectively. And so I really encourage you to get on board, womenshealthadvocates.org. You're welcome to join. Follow us on all the social media stuff. And then we have Equal Resource Day coming up on June 10th. Let's just post like crazy on that day. Let's really elevate a lot of the issues that we're talking about today.
And why June 10th?
June 10th, 1993 was the day that the NIH Revitalization Act became law, which finally required women and people of color to be in our clinical studies.
So I know this is very inspiring to all the women in the room, and all of us are listening to this and getting angry and fired up and also inspired at the same time. But, how do you also mobilize men, especially, I know, Jessica, you mentioned, men sit on 99% of the capital. So getting them to invest in women's health funding, and, in DC, a lot of male politicians, and in pharma C-suites, a lot of male leaders. So how do you mobilize men? And, I'm sure marketers would love to hear this as well.
It's been surprisingly easy. Men want their moms and wives and daughters and sisters to be happy, and they are actually our fiercest advocates. And increasingly, I rattled off those horrific maternal mortality stats. It is the men who are fighting for their sisters and their wives and their daughters and making sure that they're heard. I use the example of, Serena Williams gave birth and she knew something was wrong and she asked for additional testing and was ignored, and she had to insist. And if an athlete like Serena has to insist to run the test to find the blood clots that would have killed her, the rest of us really have to fight and advocate and need any advocate, particularly the men in our lives by our side, to help make sure our voices are heard. On the funding side, VC is a rather homogenous group of investors. We are working quite hard to bring more women investors into the space, but men still control the majority of the capital. So a lot of VC decks you look at, and it's all male team and all male groups, and that's just historically how it's been, and we're starting to see some changes in that. But the Women's Health Fund is actually designed to use that. So we're a fund of funds. And we invest in top performing life sciences fund on their third fund or later. And so we're literally going to these experienced fund managers that are mostly men, and whatever we put into their fund they put into women's health companies. So we're actually empowering and activating all of these male investors to go out and find amazing women's health companies. And because, they've got a lot of experience in getting them through the different raises and getting them to an exit and supporting those founders. So activating the existing investors with the existing capital and those large pools of capital has really been helpful. So thinking strategically about how do we empower the men to feel comfortable going into women's health companies and investing in women's health companies, and feel comfortable asking those questions for their wife and their daughter. We do this Health of Women Investor Summit that you mentioned once a year, and Liz has been there. That's why I'm pointing to her.
Awesome.
And we bring investors, right? And so one of my favorite investors, he started Bessemer Ventures. He's been on the Midas list multiple times. He's sitting there and he's like, we had a doctor get up and talk about breast arterial calcifications. So how many women in here get their mammograms? Yes. Yay. All right. Get your mammograms. They save your life. On your mammogram, on every single mammogram, you can see signs of the number one killer of women, which is not breast cancer. It's heart disease. But you usually have to ask. You have to ask, do you see BAC, breast arterial calcifications, on my mammogram? That if there's arterial calcifications in the arteries of your breast tissue, it's usually in the arteries of your heart as well. And so even though this is the leading killer of women and it's plainly visible on every mammogram, we haven't been telling women this. The Northwell Health System just rolled it out in the last couple of years across their 28 hospitals. Now, if you get a mammogram in the Northwell system, props to them. You get a little text message and it will tell you your density, your breast arterial calcifications, and then the results of your mammogram. And in hospitals around the country, that's not happening. So Rob, the investor, the Midas lister, he's sitting there listening to all this. And he's texting his wife and he comes over later. He's like, do people know this stuff? It's like, this is incredible. But do people know? And no, people don't know this stuff. And we haven't made it widely available. But the fact that women have to go ask to see the signs of the leading killer of women on a test that they're already getting, that should be standard, Well, and it will be soon. We'll get there. One way or the other, thanks to Liz's help.
Yeah. Maryland passed a law that actually requires notification of that, and we're working on the federal level on that. I will say the first menopause bill introduced in the 117th Congress was introduced by a man. Yes, that was not a trick question. A man, right? Because we're talking about men. And
if any man has had to put up with their wife in menopause,
my husband,
what I was going to say. My husband
exactly.
is a saint.
Exactly. I mean, most members of Congress are midlife or older, right? So they're married to women going through it or themselves are going through it. So it's important to know men are definitely part of this and they get it. And I think that we're at this time where people are talking about menopause. My mom never talked about it. So thank you for this time. This generation is talking about perimenopause, menopause, all the different things that are happening. So I think men are definitely key. The final thing I'll say that even if men don't care about their moms and daughters and wives, there's money to be made. All right? There's serious money to be made. There was a study conducted by the
Cynical
AOA.
much?
Yeah, just money. AOA DX team did this study. They did a thorough review of every single exit the past 25 years and found $100 billion in ROIs already earned in women's health investment. And it had been missed because we were misclassified. And just by classifying correctly, we see that there's tons of money to be made. And half that money is in the past 5 years. So, and Jessica's more the expert on investment, but there's actual money to be made, even if you don't have morals.
But we hope you do have morals.
You do, though.
And you're investing morally. But the investor from Mubadala who was speaking at our event, which is a big fund, they go, don't think of it as women's health. Just think of it as making money.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, there we go.
I think that's a really important point. Liz, I think you mentioned that women's health is a $1 trillion market opportunity, and that needs to be, spoken about more. And Jessica, you also said something that really stuck with me in one of our previous conversations, which is that every woman in this room has the ability to change the statistics that we talked about at the start of this conversation. So I wanted to bring sort of the marketers into this. And given that big opportunity in the women's health market, how do you think marketers can leverage, their position as healthcare communicators, pharma marketers, and really start changing some of these statistics?
You guys are going to save lives. You already do save lives. The marketing industry has the best platform and megaphone and experience. And how do we get people excited about postpartum depression and saving moms' lives? And how do we get people excited about breast arterial calcification on their mammogram so that they don't die of a heart attack and heart disease? There are brilliant ways to storytell and make it personal and creative and take it home where, in industry, we publish a report, we'll publish a publication, we'll put it in a peer-reviewed journal. That's amazing. But to make it digestible for the world that needs to vote and care and get active and say, no, we don't want to live in a country where one of the most deadly occupations is becoming a mom. We need you all to share that message. And there's no room I would rather be talking to than this room right now, because I know that all of you are able to amplify exponentially. So by telling you little tidbits about how exciting women's health is, and I truly believe women's health is the most exciting area for meaningful scientific advancement in our lifetimes. Because we're not waiting on cell and gene therapy manufacturing to scale, which it will, and it's going to be great, but we're not waiting on anything. All we need to do is turn our lens to a population that we had excluded for so long. It's low-hanging fruit, and I know with all of you here, we're not going to leave this to the next generation. This is so solvable. So all of your voices, I'm so grateful for the work you do, for all these women of distinction who've already made a difference in the life sciences and in healthcare and for so many therapeutic areas and for so many moms and families. And I know you're just getting started.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's super important for each of us to recognize that our voice matters. That is our power. And when we use that power, that is how change happens in the world. Historically has always been that way. And you are phenomenal communicators. That's why you're here. So you have tremendous power to drive change. And I'll tell you one story, just a little way of driving change. This investor, who I've come to know over the past 2 years, never did women's health, but became educated on all of this and is now totally all in. And so in her role as an investor, she'll hear the pitch. Oh, okay, yep. Okay, so tell me, how do you account for sex differences? That one question has driven so much change. Now, anyone who now pitches to her firm knows they better be ready with that question. You can do the same in your conversation.
I was going to say that question alone, when you're pitching and when you're learning about products and companies you're going to support, asking that question alone is so powerful. So we gave out money last week at Yale for the Blavatnik Fund, and we have this great grant. We're able to help researchers turn their incredible inventions into companies. And for the first time ever, we were able to do a pitch just on women's health companies. We had novel injections for osteoporosis. We had knee surgery techniques. We had continuous hormone monitors. I volunteered to be a guinea pig right then and there. Incredible inventions for women's health. And that wouldn't have been possible except that a year ago, we started requiring every single professor doing research at Yale who is going to submit for the Blavatnik funds to answer the question you just asked. How are you addressing sex-based differences? Are you using male mice and female mice? Are you using male cells and female cells? I can't tell you how many autoimmune companies come and present early research, and they use all male mice. But as we just talked about, the immune response genes are on that X chromosome in the female mice. So, looking at that fundamentally matters. And just asking that question and building it into the system, 5 years from now, nobody's going to remember a time at Yale when you could apply without being asked that question. We just changed the status quo. You could stand in the road, tell every car to turn left, or we just build the road left. And that's what we're going to do.
And
thank you. You have a great crowd here today. Like every panel, every group.
So looking ahead to the future, I know we touched on so many things that need to change, but if you were to pinpoint one thing that you hope to see change in the women's health space in the next 5 years, let's say, what would that be?
Oh, I get to go first.
I have to think
too. So there's a lot. I will say, just to kind of add on to what we were just talking about, and then I'll go there. Us using our voices as advocates to explain the gaps in women's health, which I have found bipartisan interest in that, by the way. Just a little bit of education goes a long way. And then followed up with the advocacy to increase this funding line, include the definition of women's health in the legislation. We're creating this right now, a women's health innovation pilot program within FDA. all these changes, we are actually seeing results happen. We got a $30 million increase for the Office of Research on Women's Health, for example. So it is working when we use our voice. So I just want to make sure people feel that sense of empowerment and purpose and success. It works. So what's the one thing I'd like to see 5 years from now? There's so many things, but I guess I'd like to see all 27 NIH institutes and centers actually including women in their studies and aggregating that data based on sex. I would also like to see FDA have this innovation pathway for women's health, and I also would like to see reimbursement equalize. So 3 things.
Okay, I'll take all those 3 things. Plus, I think in 5 years, we're going to have every single major life science company, pharmaceutical, biotech, drug device, they are going to be more focused on women's health. And that is, following what we're seeing with Eli Lilly and Novo and the GLP success in women. But they're starting to understand, we drug company folks, we love science. We really do. We'll nerd out all day about it in our studies. And I think in 5 years, what I want to see is all of these companies understanding the impact of involving women earlier. And I'm an advisor to McKinsey, and we're putting out a new report, Project 23, and for the 23rd chromosome. And Project 23 looks at 15 assets already on the market. And it looks at how long it takes women to get diagnosed versus men, how long do women stay on the drugs and get them refilled versus men. And if we just looked at the women more closely for those 15 assets already on the market, that's $5 billion a year left on the table right now. $5 billion left on the table, and that's existing assets. So, in 5 years, I want to see everyone fully taking advantage of focusing on women earlier, getting them diagnosed earlier, getting them to stay on their medicine so they stay healthier longer, and really capturing that $5 billion a year, but also building the market and integrating in how powerful the female consumer is, driven by that new science. So let's start there.
There's a lot of work to be done, but also you both are so inspiring. Thank you so much for joining and being our keynote speakers today.
Thank you.
The MM+M podcast is produced by our editorial staff, Bella Jakowski, Lesha Bushek, Steve Madden, Jameson Fleming, and Jack O'Brien, with production and editing by Bill Fitzpatrick and Gordon Thaler. Listen to all episodes at mmm-online.com or wherever you get your podcasts.